And welcome back to Conservative and Chic podcast. I'm honored to welcome to the show this week Congresswoman Kat Cammack, who serves the citizens of Florida's 3rd Congressional District. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us today, Congresswoman.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Okay. I wanted to start out, as I'm always interested to see in how my guests develop their interest in perspective fields, and would love to learn how you got your interest in politics and how you started running for office.
So the shorter version of how I ended up in politics today is we being my family, we ended up losing our home, and after being homeless for several months, really had that come to Jesus moment of I can either put my head in the sand and rebuild my life and pretend like things never happened, or I can take this moment in time and go and fight for better policies and fight for families like mine. And that led me down a journey to not only run campaigns, but become a chief of staff, and then ultimately running for office myself. And it's been a whirlwind journey, but as I have told so many, you really have to recognize that moment of what is driving you and just jump on it. And if it doesn't scare you, then that dream, that decision, it's not big enough. And so people tell me all the time, like, I think I could do this or I could do that. And I'm like, well, that's settling. You should have a dream so big that it scares you. And in my case, it really did scare me. Coming from no political background, no family connections, a very working class family, no money, that kind of thing. Like people like me don't end up in Congress. And so it was a very scary thing to take that leap, but I'm forever grateful that I did.
Awesome. And I was elected at 25 to the city council in my hometown, and even on a much smaller scale than running for Congress, it can be a challenge and also very rewarding. Can you talk about your first run for Congress? You kind of alluded to that a little bit, but can you talk about how it was to start from having no political background? I ran some in college, ran a campaign in college, but I never had run for office myself. So starting that on the ground level is a challenge. So can you kind of talk about how you set up and kind of your first run for Congress?
Yeah, so I had been the chief of staff and the deputy chief of staff for the member who had taken the seat before me, and it was a learning experience. I got to see behind the curtain of what that day to day looks like for a member. But one of the things that was the turning point was my then boss. He gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'm sending you a press release and it's my retirement and I think you should get ready." And I was like, "Ready for what?" And next thing you know, I'm sitting in a barbecue joint with my husband and my best friend, and we are trying to decide whether or not we should go back into private sector, which I'm a 3rd-generation commercial sandblaster. That's our family business, and or make further progress on all the things that we had done serving the district that we had in Florida. And my husband and my best friend, they had all the best reasons in the world as to why I shouldn't run. And what it came down to was a moment where I looked at my husband and I said, "Hey, babe, we don't have kids yet." This was back in 2019. It was about December. And I said, "But when we do have kids, are you going to be able to look our kids in the eye and tell them that mom and dad did everything that we possibly could to give them the same opportunities that we've been given?" And coming from my background, of, like I said, a very working class family, worked very, very hard. I was the first in my family to go to college, worked multiple jobs. Can't even begin to tell you how many dang jobs I worked. My husband, he had a single mom that raised him. And, we wanted to build on the hard work that both of our moms had done throughout their lives. And, we just kept seeing that American dream and that opportunity slip away. And, he's a very sexy firefighter, but that moment got him and he started tearing up a little bit. And he said, "Okay, I'll do the signs," and of course the booth that's been eavesdropping on the conversation the entire time, they start crying and the waitress is crying and everyone's crying. And so that was the decision to run. And my first race, I hadn't held elected office previously. So I had no city council, county commission, state house, none of that under my belt. And I knew that there was going to be people who wanted to jump in this seat because it's a quote unquote safe Republican seat. But that draws all kinds of interesting folks from out of state, self-funders, all kinds of characters. And so we ended up getting the largest primary field in the state of Florida for the 2020 election. And I'll never forget doing interviews with different organizations, advocacy organizations, and they're like, well, this guy's got, 5 million in the bank, and this guy's got a check that he's going to write, and, all these things. And I said, you know what? I will have people that outspend me and outraise me. No doubt. I am not independently wealthy. My husband and I, we actually took out all our savings to run. And I had promised my husband that I was going to stock the shelves at Publix at night to pay back our savings if it didn't work. And I kept saying, yes, we will be outspent. And sure, there will be people who are quote unquote smarter than us, with the very fancy degrees and PhDs, but no one will ever outwork us. And they never did. And that was the difference maker.
Absolutely. And speaking of hard work, I remember interning on a Hill and that no 2 days are the same. You Everything changes in a moment's notice. But can you kind of give my listeners an idea of what maybe an average day is like for you? I know that you have kind of behind the scenes. People don't know about constituent services that you offer. Some people don't realize all the services that you offer, but also meeting with organizations and of course your committee meetings and on the Hill. So you have so many different things that you juggle throughout the day. But can you kind of give like how a day-to-day life for you is like on the Hill?
You're 100% right in that no 2 days are the same. Like today for me started at 2 a.m. because my 8-month-old daughter is sick. And, every mom knows that when your baby is sick, it's just, you feel awful because there's just some things you just can't change, and all you can do is be there to comfort them. And so my day today started at 2 a.m. and then hopped on a plane and had a full day. But if I am already in Washington and there's no travel involved, a typical day starts depending on whether you have media or not. So if you do early morning television or not. So you could get up at 4 and be in hair and makeup until like 5:30. And if that's the case, it's a very early morning. You try to make it an early-ish night. But you have your first official meetings starting at 9. So you go to conference, which is the entire Republican conference gets together for the first official day of the week and kind of walks through what's happening on the floor and in committee and just kind of walks through some things. And that can go for about an hour, hour and a half sometimes. And about 10, that's when committee starts. Now I'm on energy and commerce, so I have many subcommittees that are constantly moving and grooving on some very controversial, very big topics like healthcare and big tech. And so I'll be in 2 committee hearings at once. And so on the 3rd level of the building, I'll be in one hearing. And then on the 1st floor, I'll be in another hearing. And while I am in those, I am taking meetings in 15-minute blocks in the hallway and with constituents in different groups. And then in between that, you're doing votes on the floor. So it's about a quarter mile from the committee room to walk to the Capitol. So you're walking to the Capitol, you do votes, you're doing interviews with reporters walking back to committee or to meetings. Typically in a day, especially in Washington, you're doing some fundraising activities. I know people don't like to talk about that, but that is just, in fact, the reality of it. You're either on the phone or taking meetings across the street at the Capitol Hill Club. And you, without a doubt, you're having dinners with colleagues or doing events. And I would say my average day will start in the office about 8:39. Sometimes not, if not earlier. And then I'll get back to the house at about 10. And that's pretty typical. And it's a brutal schedule if you're doing it right. I'm still trying to figure out how some of the old timers do this and not be as exhausted as most days I feel.
I look at Chuck Grassley, who's 92, and I'm just like, how are you doing this? Because he's my United States Senator, and and that's who I interned for. And his amount of energy that he has, people don't realize all the behind the scenes. They think, oh, some of the people just think you just go to vote and you go to committee hearings. There's all kinds of stuff that you do that
Oh, yeah.
people don't. So I love to learn a little bit more about that. So thank you. And you talked about votes. Right now, the SAVE Act is the big issue and you're a big proponent of that, and so am I. I think it's something that needs to be done is common sense, voter integrity law. And can you tell us a little bit about the status of that? Because I know like I said, you're a big proponent of that.
Yeah, it's a common sense deal for me. I just think that when you are required to have a photo ID for any other real function in daily life in America, whether it's renting an apartment, driving a car, buying cigarettes, buying alcohol, cashing a check, you name it, getting on an airplane. I mean, you have to have a photo ID, a government ID to do basically anything these days. And all the bill says is that in order to register to vote, you have to, 1, prove that you are a citizen of the United States, which I think is, again, the most common sense thing.
Yeah.
some opponents of the bill say, oh, well, you already do. And, that's that pesky little checkbox that nobody ever goes back and verifies because there's no enforcement mechanism of that. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that you're required to show photo ID in order to vote. And it's absolutely ludicrous to me that the number one argument against citizenship and photo ID for voting is that it's going to somehow disenfranchise women. And argument that they continue to push is that women aren't smart enough if they have gotten married and changed their name to get an ID that shows that they are in fact a citizen of the United States. I mean, to me, that is just absolutely ludicrous. So yeah, I will be dropping an op-ed here soon as chairwoman of the Republican Women's Caucus, really dispelling line by line all of the arguments of the left, because for the longest time, ironically, the left has said that they are the champion and the party of women, when in fact they are always constantly pushing for men to be in women's locker rooms and play in sports and, can't tell what a woman is. And is now saying, and you're too dumb to figure out how to get your documents, which of course any woman who has gotten married and changed her name, got a new social security card, got all her documents. And to me, again, it was just such a ridiculously silly argument that once again just proves that the left has lost their way in so many ways. But yeah, common sense is not common, especially up here on Capitol Hill.
Exactly. And the last question I have for you is, what is your advice for young women? I know we're millennials, but young women who are in college thinking about their career and thinking about entering politics. What advice do you have for them, or just advice in general for young women as they enter into their careers?
The number one piece of advice that I give to college students in general is don't get a poli-sci degree. Don't get a poli-sci degree. And the reason I say that is because politics is the business of everything else. And so the people that I really strive to include in our organization are folks that have degrees in biology or chemistry or engineering or business, finance, economics. And the reason is because they bring something different to the table. Politics is best learned hands-on and typically through a campaign, or if you want to work in politics in the official capacity, it's way more beneficial to come to the table with a skill set and a value add than if you just say, hey, I have my shiny poli-sci degree and I think I know how this goes in theory. It does not work well typically ever. I will say that for women who want to run eventually, lines are for movie theaters and amusement parks. Don't wait in line just because someone says, oh, you need to wait your turn. That is to me one of the most condescending things that someone can say to another human being, especially one who wants to step up and serve. But the other thing is I see sometimes a lot of folks who don't have careers, don't have private sector experience, and then they want to just run for one office to get to another office, to get to another office, to get to another office. That's really doing a disservice to the office itself. Yes, there is an art to being a representative, but having real world experience is incredibly valuable and something that will be a game changer for you, not just on the campaign trail, but in how you conduct your office. And so I highly recommend build a career outside of politics. It will give you context and a perspective that no one else has. And I would say that that is the most important thing besides building a network. And build a network, you got to remember people's names, stay in touch with them. You make your friends long before you meet them.
And I thank you so much for your time, Congresswoman. It was an honor to have you. And I want to thank you for everything that you do, not just for the people of Florida's 3rd, but what you do in the United States Congress. Like you said, you bring so much, you're a hard worker, you bring that perspective of common sense. So I really thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. And I would be remiss if I didn't say go Gators.